Imagine you control an empire so large that it takes a royal messenger riding a horse at full speed. Day. And night. 3 months to cross from one end to the other. Imagine your treasury holds more gold and silver than any nation on earth has ever seen. Imagine that the entire ancient world, from Egypt to India, from Greece to Central Asia, is economically dependent on you. Now imagine that you didn't just build that empire with swords, you built it with money. This is the story of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, the world's first true economic superpower. An empire that didn't just conquer nations, it absorbed them, monetized them, and bound them together through one of the most sophisticated financial systems the ancient world had ever seen. And here's the part nobody talks about. Persia didn't just use money. Persia may have helped invent the very concept of it. Stay with me, because this story is going to completely change how you think about the ancient world and about power itself. Before we talk economics, we need to understand the sheer scale of what we're dealing with. In 550 BCE, a man named Cyrus the Great, king of a relatively minor Persian tribe, launched one of the most extraordinary military and political campaigns in human history. Within 30 years, he and his successors had created an empire that stretched from modern-day Greece and Turkey in the west, all the way to Pakistan and parts of India in the east, from Egypt and Libya in the south to the steppes of Central Asia in the north. At its peak under Darius the Great, around 500 BCE, the Achaemenid Persian Empire covered approximately 5.5 million square kilometers. It held an estimated 44 to 50 million people, which was at the time somewhere between 35 and 44% of the entire world's population. Let that sink in. More than a third of every human being alive on Earth lived inside this one empire. But size alone doesn't make you an economic superpower. The Roman Empire was large too. The Mongol Empire was the largest land empire ever. Size is just geography. What made Persia extraordinary, what truly made it the world's first economic superpower, was what it did with that territory. Because the Persians didn't just rule their empire, they monetized it. To understand what Persia did with money, we first need to go back just a bit further in history, to a small but enormously influential kingdom called Lydia, in what is now Western Turkey. Around 600 BCE, the Lydians, under their legendary king Croesus, a man whose name became synonymous with fabulous wealth, began minting the world's first standardized coins. These were made of electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver, and they were stamped with an official seal, a guarantee of their weight and purity. This was revolutionary. Before coins, trade required either barter, trading one good directly for another, or the use of weighed metals, which required a scale every time you made a transaction. The Lydian coin changed everything. But here's where Persia enters the story in a massive way. When Cyrus the Great conquered Lydia in 547 BCE, he didn't just absorb Lydian territory, he absorbed their monetary technology. And his successors, particularly Darius the Great, took that technology and scaled it to an entirely new level. Around 515 BCE, Darius introduced what would become one of the most famous coins in the ancient world, the gold Daric. The gold Daric was not just a coin, it was a political statement. Every Daric was stamped with the image of the Persian king as a running archer, a symbol of royal authority, military power, and divine legitimacy. And because these coins were minted to a precise standard, 8.4 grams of nearly pure gold, merchants from Greece to India knew exactly what they were getting. The Daric became the reserve currency of the ancient world. Think about what that means in modern terms. Imagine the US dollar, trusted globally, accepted everywhere, the foundation of international trade. That's what the Persian Daric was to the ancient world. But Darius didn't stop there. He also introduced the silver shekel, a lower denomination coin, creating what was essentially a two-tier monetary system. Gold for large transactions, silver for everyday commerce. This is sophisticated monetary policy. This is the kind of economic thinking we associate with modern central banks. Not with empires from 2,500 years ago, and it worked. Within a generation, Persia had become the hub of a continent-spanning monetary economy, the first in human history. But a monetary economy is only as powerful as the infrastructure that supports it. And this is where Darius the Great showed his true genius, not just as a conqueror, but as an economic architect. He built the Royal Road, stretching approximately 2,700 kilometers from the city of Sardis on the Aegean coast of modern Turkey all the way to Susa, the Persian administrative capital in southwestern Iran. The Royal Road was the ancient world's greatest feat of infrastructure. Every 25 to 30 kilometers along this road, there was a royal post station, a caravanserai stocked with fresh horses, food, water, and royal messengers. The Greek historian Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BCE, marveled at the system, recording that royal couriers could cover the entire 2,700 kilometers in just 7 days. 7 days from Turkey to Iran. For comparison, an ordinary traveler on foot would need 3 months to make the same journey. This wasn't just impressive engineering. This was economic infrastructure of the highest order. Think about what the Royal Road enabled. Merchants could now transport goods, contracts, and price information across the empire faster than ever before. A grain trader in Egypt could get pricing information from Babylon. A textile merchant in India could coordinate shipments with buyers in Greece. The Royal Road made the Persian Empire function like a single, integrated economic zone, centuries before the concept of free trade areas or common markets even existed. And Darius reinforced this by implementing a standardized system of weights and measures across the empire. In markets from Egypt to Afghanistan, merchants used the same units, the same standards, the same rules. This is exactly what modern economists recommend when building integrated trade zones. The EU did this in the 20th century. Darius did it in the 6th century BCE. Now we come to the part that most history books gloss over, but which is arguably the most fascinating aspect of the Persian economic system: the treasury of Persepolis. When archaeologists excavated the ruins of Persepolis in the 20th century, they made a startling discovery. Beneath the great palace complex, they found thousands of clay tablets, now known as the Persepolis Fortification Tablets and the Persepolis Treasury Tablets. These tablets, written in Elamite cuneiform, were essentially administrative financial records. They recorded payments, rations, transactions, and the movement of goods and workers across the empire. What emerged from these records was a picture of a staggeringly complex bureaucratic economy. The Persian state wasn't just collecting tribute and sitting on it. It was actively managing economic flows across the empire. Workers, from Greek craftsmen to Babylonian laborers, were paid in standardized rations of wine, grain, and sometimes silver. These payments were carefully calibrated based on skill level, gender, and job type. Yes, the tablets show that Persian women workers received pay. Not equal pay by modern standards, but systematic, recorded compensation. This was not common in the ancient world. The Persian treasury also functioned as something like a sovereign wealth fund. The empire accumulated vast reserves of gold and silver, not just by conquest, but through a sophisticated tax system. Each of the empire's 20 to 30 satrapies, the regional provinces, paid a fixed annual tribute in silver. The amounts were carefully calibrated based on the economic productivity of each region. Babylon paid more than a remote mountain province. Egypt paid an enormous sum based on its agricultural wealth. The Greek historian Herodotus recorded these tribute amounts in detail, and when modern economists have analyzed them, they have found that the assessments were remarkably rational. Roughly proportional to each region's estimated economic output. This is taxation policy based on ability to pay. This is progressive economics. In 500 BCE, and all this silver flowed into the central treasury at Persepolis, where it was stored, managed, and redistributed. Modern estimates suggest that at the peak of the empire under Xerxes, around 480 BCE, the Persian treasury held somewhere between 180,000 and 270,000 talents of silver, roughly equivalent in modern purchasing power terms to hundreds of billions of dollars. When Alexander the Great conquered Persepolis in 330 BCE, the sheer volume of treasure he found there reportedly required 20,000 mules and 5,000 camels just to carry it away. That is not the treasury of a military empire. That is the treasury of an economic empire. Here's a question that doesn't get asked enough. How did the Persians keep such a vast empire together? The Roman answer was legions. The Mongol answer was terror. The British answer was gunboats and trade monopolies. The Persian answer was something more subtle, and in many ways more effective: economic inclusion. Cyrus the Great established a radical policy for his time. Conquered peoples would be allowed to keep their religions, their customs, their local laws, and their local economies, as long as they paid tribute and acknowledged Persian authority. This wasn't just idealism. This was brilliant economic strategy. Consider Babylon. When Cyrus conquered it in 539 BCE, Babylon was one of the richest cities in the world, a hub of trade, banking, and commerce. Rather than looting it and destroying its economic infrastructure, Cyrus preserved it. He let Babylonian merchants continue their banking practices. He returned the statues of Babylonian gods that previous conquerors had taken. He released the Jewish exiles, allowing them to return to Israel. The result? Babylon continued to generate enormous tax revenue for the Persian Empire for the next 2 centuries. This is the economic logic of acquisition versus destruction. A living, productive Babylon was worth infinitely more than a sacked, ruined one. The Persians applied this logic empire-wide. They didn't impose a single Persian culture or religion on their subjects. They created what modern economists might call an optimal currency area, a diverse economic zone unified by shared monetary standards, trade infrastructure, and legal frameworks, while allowing local variation in everything else. The result was an economic system that was self-reinforcing. Merchants had incentives to trade within the empire. Local elites had incentives to cooperate with Persian rule. And the Persian state collected its tribute reliably from a system that largely ran itself. Now, you might be thinking, but didn't Persia lose to Greece? Didn't the mighty Persian Empire get beaten by little city-states? Doesn't that undercut the whole superpower argument? It's a fair question. And the answer is more complicated and more interesting than you think. Yes, the Persian invasions of Greece under Darius in 490 BCE at Marathon and under Xerxes in 480 BCE at Thermopylae and Salamis ended in Persian military failure. The Greek city-states, particularly Athens and Sparta, achieved one of history's great underdog victories. But here's what the Hollywood version of history leaves out. Persia won economically, even when it lost militarily. After the Persian Wars, Persia shifted strategy. Instead of invading Greece directly, Persian diplomats began funding Greek city-states to fight each other. Persian gold paid for Spartan armies to fight Athens during the Peloponnesian War from 431 to 404 BCE. Persian gold helped Thebes break Spartan power. Persian gold funded fleet after fleet in Greek waters. The ancient Greeks had a word for Persian gold used in this way. They called it Persian archers. Not the soldiers. The coins? The gold Darics, which showed an archer on their face. Persian archers defeated Greek armies more effectively than Persian spearmen ever could. This is economic warfare, using financial resources as a geopolitical weapon, funding proxy conflicts, destabilizing rivals through their own internal divisions. Sound familiar? It should, because this playbook has been used by every major power in history since, right up to the present day. Persia essentially invented soft power through economic leverage. 2,500 years before the term was coined. Of course, no empire lasts forever. And the Persian Empire's fall, when it came under Alexander the Great between 334 and 330 BCE, was swift and total. But even in its collapse, the Persian economic system taught the world something important. When Alexander destroyed the Persian treasury and flooded the Mediterranean with Persian gold and silver, the result was rapid inflation across the ancient world. Prices rose sharply in Greece, Egypt, and throughout the Near East, because suddenly the money supply had exploded. This is a classic economics lesson. Too much currency in circulation causes inflation. The Persian system had kept this in check by hoarding large amounts of gold and silver in the treasury, essentially acting as a deflationary anchor for the ancient economy. When Alexander shattered that anchor, the ancient world felt the economic shockwaves for decades. Ironically, Alexander himself recognized the genius of the Persian system, even as he destroyed it. He retained many Persian administrative practices, kept Persian satraps in their positions, wore Persian clothing, and attempted to merge Greek and Persian culture in a project that historians call fusion. He understood what Rome would later understand, what the British Empire would understand, what every successful empire since has understood. You cannot rule an empire without an economic system. And the Persians had built the best one the world had ever seen. So what did Persia leave behind? More than most people realize. The concept of standardized coinage as a tool of imperial control was adopted by every empire since, from Rome to Britain to the United States with its dollar. The Royal Road's postal relay system became the model for every subsequent empire as communication infrastructure, including, remarkably, the Pony Express in 19th century America, which worked on almost identical principles. The satrapy system, regional governors with fiscal autonomy within a centralized framework, became the blueprint for Roman provincial administration, for medieval feudalism, and arguably for modern federal systems of government. The Persian policy of economic tolerance, allowing diverse peoples to participate in a shared economic zone while maintaining their own identities, is the philosophical foundation of free trade agreements and economic unions like the European Union. And the Persian treasuries function as a monetary stabilizer, accumulating reserves during good times to provide economic stability, is precisely what modern central banks and sovereign wealth funds do today. The Persians did all of this without computers, without modern economics theory, without any of the tools we take for granted. They did it through observation, experimentation, and the exercise of raw political will, guided by leaders who understood intuitively that lasting power is not built on military conquest alone. It is built on economic architecture. Here's what I want you to take away from this. The Persian Empire rose to global dominance not because it had the biggest army, though it did, not because it had the most advanced technology, though it did. It rose because it understood something that most empires never figure out, that economic systems are more powerful than military systems, that the nation which controls the currency, the trade routes, and the financial infrastructure of a region controls the region itself. The Persian Daric circulated in markets from Athens to Afghanistan. Persian weights and measures governed trade from Egypt to India. Persian roads carried goods and information faster than any system before or since for 2 centuries. When you hold a coin in your hand today, any coin, any currency, you're holding something whose DNA traces back, at least in part, to what Darius the Great built in the mountains of ancient Iran 2,500 years ago. The Persians didn't just build an empire, they built the template for every economic superpower that has come since. And that, more than any battle, more than any palace, more than any tomb, is the true measure of their greatness.